everybody, and welcome back to the Legal Weekly Wine, where we discuss the week's hottest legal topics. It is the last week of June in 2024, and we are still on fire. I do not know how we can have hotter legal topics than we currently do. I think we're sitting in a bonfire of legal topics. We just had the debates. That was yesterday, Thursday, the 27th of June, debates between President Biden and former President Trump. We are going to talk about that one today. It was such a big topic, and we have so many things to discuss that we are going to separate it into its own program. So normally we do this once a week. We publish once a week, but we have that. And, we have at least 5 huge cases that were just brought down and decided by the Supreme Court. We've got the pharmaceutical opioid crisis case regarding a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing by Purdue Pharma. We want to talk about that. We also want to talk about the homeless encampment case. That decision has come down this week. We have federal agency issues, the Chevron type of case that we've been waiting for. That came down this week. We also have the emergency abortion case coming out of Idaho. That's happened this week. And then we can't forget what seems like the biggest one we've been waiting for is the January 6th cases. And this is where the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 has been used to prosecute many people for alleged crimes of obstruction through this act for their actions on January 6th. Some of that has been overturned as of today. So we want to talk about all of those. Our program is not long enough for that, and we don't know that you would listen to it if it were. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it up. This will be the one time that we break all of these up into smaller segments and into more specific bite-sized pieces. We may hit another 30 minutes to an hour on each topic, but we don't want to miss them. They're too big. So this video will be just on the debates. We are going to give you our legal and political science opinions about the debates and what happens now. Then we will come back with at least 2 videos regarding the other decisions. And Monday, we've got the biggest case we've been waiting on coming down on July 1st, and that will be the one with presidential immunity. That was delayed until Monday. We might have another 1 or 2. So all of this is happening. And in addition to that, I'm going to throw one more hot topic onto the fire. And that is that we have had a filing, the first that we know of its kind, by the Kansas Attorney General against Pfizer, alleging false and misleading claims related to the COVID-19 vaccines. Misleading advertising, misleading claims, material information, false information, especially surrounding pregnant women and others who are more vulnerable and at risk. So that was filed this week too. It has been hot. Welcome, everybody. My name's Virginia Tarani. I'm the CEO of The Law Unscripted, and we host the Legal Weekly Wine. And I am joined by my 2 expert colleagues. I've got Chelsea Rogers, who is also an attorney with me. We both work in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia with Tarani Law, LLC. And Chelsea, it's good to have you as one of our co-hosts of the Law Unscripted and Weekly Wine.
I'm glad to be here. We have tons to talk about today.
Yeah, we have kind of a mini program before we tape these. We get so excited, we talk, and then we're like, oh, wow, we should have hit record during all of that. Now we get to say it all again.
Absolutely.
And then we have on our expert panel, we have Dr. John Weil. He is the Dean of the Honors College of Middle Tennessee State University, and he is particularly suited for today's conversation regarding the debates. Not only did he grow up in the world of debate, he actually was a debater in college, and he has been following in the footsteps of our founders. He's a political scientist who loves the Constitution, knows all about the Constitution, the amending process, constitutional law, the founding of America. And what we're going to have him do today is walk us through what happens next. I know we have a lot of people asking, well, can Biden drop out? Can we force Biden out? What do we do? And honestly, I'm not entirely sure of the process. We're going to be asking Dr. Weil, is it a constitutional process? Is it an election process? Are they combined? What are we looking at? What pieces of legislation, what laws are we looking at that say, if it's even a law, what to do next? Because a lot of us are floundering out here in the sea of, is this it? What are our options? So welcome, Dr. Weil. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
All right. We are going to be drinking today. We always take a little glass of wine for the weekly wine, but honestly, I should have been drinking bottles last night for the debates, or Xanax, or a little bit of both. I don't know. Dr. Weil.
I felt like it was a fever dream.
That's what I do.
What did
Cheese puffs.
Cheese puffs.
I felt like I had taken something. I felt like it was a fever dream. This couldn't be real. I'm hallucinating.
Right.
Truly.
Were we on a trip?
That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was quite significant. And honestly, I stayed up for hours after the debate, and I was pacing around, and my husband, while I was watching the debate, was hearing me yell at the television and scream out, "That's a terrible answer. You should be answering this way. Just say this." So I became a politician in my own right last night, telling the world how it should have been done, electing myself to president, even though I don't want the job. Surely anyone could do it better than that. Those were my own thoughts last night. Dr. Weil, I understand that you and your wife were having a little bit of a time as well.
Well, I had the blessing of watching the first hour in my office with no distractions. And then I got home and she was about as animated as you were. So I kept saying, please let me hear what they're saying. But, my love affair with debates goes back to 1960.
Wow.
And I got to watch one of the Kennedy-Nixon debates with my grandmother. And I remember it very distinctly. And I think that I have seen every presidential debate since. My students think I saw the Lincoln-Douglas debates, but I didn't. I've read a lot about them. And they actually weren't a presidential debate. They were actually a debate for the Senate seat in Illinois. But, certainly the propaganda, the information about them was very influential in the presidential contest.
And then you entered your own debate team, right? Was it at William and Mary you were on the debate team?
I was on the debate team in high school and at William and Mary. And of course, as you know, I coached mock trial for 25 years. And the saddest thing about it, at least according to the press, Biden spent a good week at Camp David. And as someone who has tree allergies, I am beginning to wonder if that was not that may have been part of the problem. He sounded like he had a sinus issue.
Right.
And a lot of debate and any public speaking is assertiveness, confidence. He didn't have it sounded like he was weak, and that he may not be physically weak. It may be simply that he was having trouble projecting his voice. But it was, from the beginning on, it was almost cringeworthy. And the sad thing is, Trump had really screwed up. Trump had set this low bar, and the only thing that Trump was wrong about was his prediction that, Biden was going to get a shot in the rear end and he was going to come out all jacked up. Well, he would have been a lot better off, maybe, if he had done that.
Somebody get that man some Adderall. Come on.
Or, use the defibrillator. It was rough. As many of you who do watch and listen to our program on a more regular basis, it's fairly obvious by now. We try to be as neutral as possible in the terms of what our legal opinions are, what we proffer as to what we think is happening, how the courts are coming down on decisions, what the legal pieces are. But I think most are familiar that none of us on this program is quite fond of Trump, and in fact, quite the opposite. But we're also not really pro-Biden here. So you're hitting the mix of what I think are a lot of Americans out there that, at least in our personal opinions, we represent more of the idea of we're not pro either party. We're more anti one party. But what do you do with that?
Well, part of the problem with the debate thing, and I have emphasized so far the performance element,
Yes.
projection, whatever. I think if you were to judge it on content, you could be a little bit more generous to Biden. I think both of them prevaricated, but I think
Yeah.
that Trump took it to a new level. The thing that I found most disturbing, and I would urge people to think about this, if every time Trump mentioned the word immigrant, if you had put in the word Jew,
Yeah.
what would we think of it? In other words,
Yeah.
think of another minority. And if somebody had constantly scapegoated another minority and called them murderers and rapists and said
And
they were taking
rats.
jobs, would clearly be identified as racial, other stereotyping. And I found that, very, very disturbing. It's not new, but
In American democracy, it's newer. It hasn't been used as
well, I
much.
mean, we've had plenty of race baiting, particularly in the South, during the Jim Crow era. And we had, McCarthy. I mean, you had,
The communists.
communists sort of cover. One of the things I don't like. I mean, both candidates do it, but when you start a conversation with my opponent, this leftist or this rightist or fascist or this or that, it's usually not a very good sign. It's sort of a sign of degeneration of rhetoric, and I don't think either of them particularly did very well last night.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's fascinating that the point that you're making of let's replace a couple of phrases and really where are we? Because was it, and I'm showing my ignorance on geography and some of history, but was it Rwanda where that we were having their cockroaches, right? Where they're naming a sector, a group of people
Well,
as
and to some
insects, as
degree,
vermin, as, yeah.
we did something similar in World War II. All the portrayals of Japanese were, either of, subhuman or whatever, and that was a foreign enemy. So in a sense, it's not more justifiable. But I mean, one of the terrible consequences was the incarceration of over 100,000 people of
Right.
Japanese ancestry. And one of the things that he did not answer last night was the question about you have basically said that you're going to round up, 5 to 10 million people. Where are you going to
And
put them?
deport
What are you
them.
going to do with them? He evaded that question. He evaded the question, I thought, of was he willing to accept the results of the election?
I agree.
And there were several, and there were a couple where both of them sort of but particularly, and I think Chelsea, you pointed this out early in our conversation, the question about childcare. Biden didn't say
Yeah.
much, but at least he said, well, that we had this tax incentive. Trump seemed to purposely evade the question, didn't even come close to answering it.
He never, the question was specifically about
Right,
African Americans and
right.
the effect of childcare specifically on them. And he
The
never
one
even
thing,
said anything about it.
He brought it back to immigration somehow.
the,
It's what I like to call word salad. It's like if I talk long enough, I can make anything right or wrong.
yeah,
Because you're not saying anything. You're just talking.
the one thing that I don't know if it puzzles me. I'm not good. I think that it's positive. I really thought when CNN took this, CNN has, I like CNN, but they have a bias, I think, pretty sort of a Democratic bias, certainly an
Right.
anti-Trump bias. And I really thought, particularly that Jake Tapper usually pushes back. Somebody says something wrong and he says, well, that's just, that's not true, or, that's not true, but go on and answer your question. Neither he nor Dana pushed back. And in some ways, that's very good because what should have happened is the two should have pushed back against one another. And Biden should have been, and for occasionally he would say, well, that's malarkey or that's a lie. But then Trump just said the same thing, even when it wasn't a lie. So
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it was, you couldn't have had a fairer set of people asking the questions But was that good or bad? Would it have been better had they pushed back against both of the candidates when they made misstatements?
I wish we had a live fact checker, like in
Yeah.
the middle of like someone has said something that is not, this is how I feel about it, but this is I'm giving a number, I'm making a claim that this is a factual thing. We stop the time and we
Yes.
have a fact checker look it up. And then we say, yes, that's correct. No, it's not. And game back on. I think that would be better.
The opposite would be if we could just take a photo of their pants and see if they're on fire. That might help. I think we would have had, every time the fire alarm goes off, that it's
Liar, liar.
I mean, Trump is coming for your job, Dr. Vile. We got some interesting constitutional analysis about how he felt that Roe was decided and how other people felt about it. So you watch out. He might be coming.
That was a rough one for me. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Chelsea, because, as attorneys and Dr. Vile, with you being so familiar with constitutional law for decades, his analysis of Roe was very reminiscent to me of his analysis of law regarding the New York trials, where it's like, are you not familiar enough with it? Are you purposely...
You're speaking of Biden or Trump? Because
I was going to say Biden was... Yeah. Equally terrible at explaining.
Yeah, I
both
were. He got so much in the weeds that and almost sort of wasn't quite sure what happened. So yeah, neither of them really gave a very good explanation of that.
Yeah, I mean, I liked that Biden said when he was pressed of what term abortions would you accept. I liked that he initially went to Roe.
Right.
I would go back to Roe. Why do we need to reinvent it? Why do I need to give you I'm saying it better than him. Why do I need to give you a timeline?
You're saying it's so much more clear than he was.
But what's odd about that?
Why do I need to invent it? Here it was. It was Roe. Yeah. Let's reinstate it.
What's odd about that is Roe was not a legislative decision.
Correct.
It's not a political decision. But what it may point to is, as much, and I'm among those who have criticized, a lot of people criticize Roe as coming out of sort of thin air. It owed as much to Blackmun's summer at Mayo Clinic as it did to anything that he knew about the Constitution. Yes. But at the time, we probably need to remember, it was considered something of a moderate decision.
Right.
It was not, it was not completely pro-life or pro-choice. It was like now, again, there are plenty of flaws in it and one could point to, but it seems a little odd that we're going back to not to a legislative solution, national or otherwise, but let's go back to Roe versus Wade. And I'm not quite sure how we would do that other than appointing someone who, would now again then overturn Dobbs, and I guess that's possible.
Right.
I mean, I think this is where there's a lot to say about Biden. And as you said at the top, Virginia, I'm not particularly fond of either of these people, to be perfectly clear. But the eye roll that I felt like took over my entire body when he said, well, if I'm elected, then I will protect abortion. Well, you're president now, my friend. What do you mean? What is this idea that you're just going to secure those protections if you're elected? You are elected. I'm so confused. What are we doing? Are we going to have a presidential order that is, protecting the right to abortion? I'm so confused. Between that and the afterbirth abortion, can we get a woman on stage? Because what is happening?
Yeah, there were a lot of shocking claims and jabs back and forth on that. And Chelsea, I appreciate where you're headed with this, because the similar equation to me was, you're saying, well, Biden's already president. Why is he going to say, I'm going to do this? Well, why aren't you doing it now? Right. That was my thought with Trump. It was so flabbergasting to me where he's like, well, if I'm elected, then I'm going to end the Ukraine war. What?
Or when
he's going to do it before he's president.
Right. Oh, yes. He's going to do it before he's even...
would actually violate the law if he goes over and starts negotiating without the authority to do so.
As not the commander-in-chief.
There's one interesting twist, by the way, that most people don't know about. But Woodrow Wilson, who believed deeply in the parliamentary system, had thought in 1916 that if he were not reelected, that he would turn over the presidency to the incoming president and let him take care of the situation, or was it 1920 with the League of Nations? I'm not sure which, but he had a plan that basically he would step aside so the new person could come in and immediately, implement the policy.
But it was quite shocking to me that, and maybe this is me thinking as an individual rather than a legal scholar or anything like that, of is this such a narcissist where he believes he can single-handedly end the Gaza conflict, end the Ukraine war, and prevent World War III? And it was so shocking to me. It's like, really? What, you're just going to go call up your buddy Putin and say, let's end this and figure out how? It was very hard for me to watch that. It was hard for me to watch the whole thing in many different ways. But that was an especially, what I think is a shocking claim.
So may I test your Latin?
Oh, well, I'm already going to fail,
Okay,
but
let's try
throw it out
Post hoc
there.
ergo propter hoc. Do you know that fallacy?
Okay, so I know post
Wait,
hoc.
hold on. Is this one of the logical fallacies? Hold on. Give me a second. Say it one more time.
Yes.
I think
Post
I
hoc
actually.
ergo propter hoc.
I don't. It's after.
You know what
something.
post means?
Yes, after.
So after this, therefore because of this.
Right.
So one of the most outrageous
Correlation, causation.
claims, although there was a little substance to it, which we can talk about, but Trump's most outrageous claim is that if he were president, none of this would have ever happened.
Right.
That Ukraine happened because of Biden. Israel happened according to Biden because of Biden.
And his weird comparison
he made some connection in saying that Biden had projected weakness and that in Afghanistan and elsewhere. The problem, of course, is Biden was basically implementing something that Trump had already said he was going to do. So now, maybe he could have done it more efficiently, that sort of thing. But it was a logical leap, to be sure.
And it was interesting because he did keep saying, the Afghanistan withdrawal, which nobody's proud of. I don't think anybody thinks that went well. I'm saying that's the nicest way to phrase that. But for him to continue to say throughout, this is the worst, thing that's ever happened in American history, it was, I really found myself saying, screaming at the TV, really? What about Vietnam? Does anybody remember the days where we were getting the choppers out and carrying the last people out of Vietnam? Is this Afghani? Not that this is a good thing, not that anything about it was good, but is this really as bad as he says it is the worst thing that's happened in the history of America?
So one of the best ways to understand yesterday's debate from Trump's perspective is to look at his inaugural address. And as you know, I have a book on presidential inaugural addresses, and Trump's is often referred to as the American Carnage speech, because the speech basically is, we're going to hell in a handbasket, we're a third world nation, nobody respects us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's exactly what he said last night.
What bothered me is, he's trying to say this is all because of Biden, but I don't believe in downgrading my country no matter who's president. Even when Trump is president, I can say, well, I still think we're a free nation. I still think we're prosperous. I can recognize that, at least we chose him rather than having somebody imposed on it. And I just think this idea of, that everything is going to hell just because one person is president. We have far too much expectation of our presidents. And this is particularly true on the economy. If the economy is up, must be the president. If it's down, it must be the president's fault. I don't buy. Do they have a peripheral effect? Certainly. But again, it's almost that post hoc ergo propter hoc. Just because they happen to be in power when the world economy goes down doesn't necessarily mean they're responsible for it. Right. And, these claims that, we're the worst country in the world and we're the poorest and whatever, get a grip. That's just ridiculous.
I did feel personally insulted by Trump saying we're a third world country. I was like, but we're not. No. We are not an impoverished African nation. We are not someone who doesn't have democracy. Is it perfect system? No human system can be perfect. But are we at the point where a dictator, an authoritarian is coming in and taking over? Well, not yet.
We have somebody who'd like to be dictator for a day.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to sign up for that at this point.
I mean,
Just let me at it.
I think what I think is really interesting. I mean, there were a lot of things, and the cringiness was real. Like I felt like I was watching this, getting the worst secondhand embarrassment of my life about both. Like it was just so terrible. And I think what you were saying earlier, Virginia, just a lot about sort of the military and really foreign affairs. I feel like I'm looking at more as an individual. I don't have the legal knowledge to really give any expertise there. But that entire bit of the conversation was crazy. I mean, it's essentially Trump saying, if I was president, I'd be the biggest bully in the world.
Yes.
And all the other bullies would just have to bow down and they would never go to war with each other because I said so, which is
even Kim
wild.
Jong-un, he was claiming he could keep him under control.
Yes. And then a weird comparison at some point, I kind of lost the plot on this one. So maybe someone can enlighten me of like a weird comparison that Biden was a Palestinian, but he would be a weak Palestinian. That whole segment, I lost the plot on what was happening.
That's really beyond the pale. I mean,
yes.
They used to say, and I get it, they're running for office, but they used to say politics ends at the water's edge. And there ought to be, there is something to that, whether you agree with Biden's policies or Trump's policies, they're U.S. policies when they're being implemented. And, we may not like it, but the least you can do is keep quiet about it. If that's,
And Chelsea, I want to bring this part up. You were saying beforehand, I said we have to bring it in, and this is a perfect place. You were watching, live streaming different things throughout, checking tweets, you were looking at memes, and there was one that was particularly potent on this piece. What was it that you were seeing?
Okay, and I will read it exactly because I do think it's funny, and I will credit Ginny Hogan. She's a comedian, and she tweets a lot about politics in America. And she said, if you don't live in the U.S., please turn the debate off. This is our private family humiliation, and we prefer you all not watch or not stare, excuse me. And that's exactly how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. This needs to be handled together, guys. Let's not project this out into the world. Like,
dirty laundry.
Yeah. Air our dirty laundry, yeah.
Yes, and this feels so strange for me to say because as someone who likes authentic conversations and tends not to be the most polished person in the world and really enjoys that, the fact that I feel the need to call for some decorum is concerning. That I never thought I would be the person who'd be like, can we have some professionalism? Because again, you hear me talk on here, it is what it is. But the fact that I feel the need, could we have just an injection of a little bit of it, feels like I have lost my sense of self because what is happening?
It's so hard to see anybody do this. It really got very petty, and we're going to talk about that with the golf game in a minute. But ultimately, what we're looking at, and my whole idea at the end of this was, Chelsea, you've said this before, is this it? Are these our only options? Is two men in their late 70s, early 80s? Are we resurrecting FDR? Is Ronald Reagan coming back?
Yeah.
Right. We're keeping Feinstein in Congress, RBJ on the Supreme Court. Why are we holding on to figures who are in such an older age? In Virginia, they retire judges at the age of 70. They force retire them. So in looking at it, it was almost as if we were going to the nursing home.
Yes.
To watch them amuse themselves and keep themselves entertained with putting on a debate.
Yes.
And
honestly, give them both an email with a PDF attachment, and the first one who can convert that PDF attachment to a Word document wins, because neither of them are going to be able to do it, and we can move on.
Yeah, and I saw someone who said it was interesting that with all the news, no one mentioned AI last night. Neither of them.
Well, because they don't even know what it is, probably.
Yeah, probably not.
But it was hard because, and Chelsea, I want to bring this to you. Dr. Val, you started by saying, the debates, part of debate is appearance, is projection. It's the physical attributes of the debate versus, so we've got the content, right? We've got the subject matter, the content, what is actually coming out of their mouths versus the presentation aspect of it. And Dr. Val, you've been good about saying, well, the voice wasn't projecting. So Biden's voice already sounded weak. There's the appearance of weakness with the soft voice versus Trump, who just appeared physically stronger in projection, more confident. But Chelsea, you had some interesting thoughts even on how President Biden looked, just even walking out onto the stage.
Absolutely. I think that the bar was so low for Biden that he just needed to look bare minimum competent. But I think the debate was over, debate. I don't think there was a win as far as content of who had better ideas. I think that was kind of a wash. But as far as the presentation, the moment Biden walked onto stage, it was done. It looked like he was like a sim being shuffled out onto the stage, and I was afraid he would keel over before he made it to the podium. And then you heard him say something, introduce himself maybe, but the voice, and it looked like he just needed to clear his throat or was having allergies or something. But I think it was over before Trump was even on stage. And there's a lot of jokes about Trump's spray tan, and as a spray tan girly myself, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I gave spray tans for a year in Georgetown in DC.
You did.
But I also love a good self tan, and normally he kind of looks like a Cheeto, and that is what it is. But I think what happened, especially when you have Biden, who looked ill, I just feel like he looked ill or frail.
Both.
In comparison with Trump, I think it made him look like a corpse. And I don't even mean that to be mean or funny, but it made because spray tans, it looks good sort of on stage, on camera. That's what it's meant for. And then it just emphasized like the paleness, like the pallor, like he looked like a kind of a sickly Victorian. Debate. Right. He looked like a sickly Victorian child. Like, I don't know what is happening. Someone get a makeup on that man. Like
the first televised debate between Nixon and Kennedy, which I watched with a grandmother, is known for different reactions of people who saw it on TV and those who heard it on the radio.
Right.
And part of it was Kennedy came out, had a nice tan.
He was young, vibrant.
Good-looking person. Nixon had actually been in the hospital, if I recall.
It's like sweaty.
Didn't have a tan, and he tended to perspire very heavily. And a lot did depend on appearance, and that's sort of a sad way to choose a president.
But
how many presidents are elected? How many short presidents have been elected, particularly after James Madison? Almost always the taller one wins.
Right. I mean, that was a common joke with Dukakis, right? When Dukakis was running, even Saturday Night Live was doing jokes and skits about him having to jump up on the platform and elevate himself. And we got to, I remember growing up with Senator Dole, who was running. Yeah. And with his deformity, I guess, his disability, which I believe was caused through action, right? Through combat action.
Yeah.
But the idea that I remember even as a child was everybody thought he was too sickly, too old, and too infirm. That he would not look good, he would not represent the country, and he ended up living for decades more. And now we've got someones that are much older, that are having even possibly more significant issues that have nothing related to military combat. And even my mother-in-law, her first comment, and she does not like Trump at all, but her first comment was a gasp, and doesn't he look waxen? In regard to Biden, yes. I thought his eyes seemed almost so vacant, where it was like he had Botox where his face couldn't move, was the idea that I was thinking, but I don't know enough about Botox to know if that's true.
I don't think that's it.
But his mouth was open for a lot of the time, probably because he was having trouble breathing.
And it was open without being able to see his teeth.
Yes.
Correct.
So the facial expressions?
It was sort of a vacant look. Like, if you saw somebody on the street like that, you'd wonder if they were all there.
Right.
Spacing out. And I think Yeah, I mean, the facial expressions, I think you could do a whole breakdown on what was happening there, but it was exactly like you said. And I think also what was interesting is even towards some of the content, I think because Biden has been in politics so long, like it or love it, he's been in politics so long, he has, I would say, a better understanding of policy and sort of the weeds of policy than Trump does. And he would be not articulating himself particularly well, but also trying to articulate nuance in policy, which I think exacerbated the issue. And then you have Trump being like, crime, economy, immigration.
Right.
We're the worst. We're the best. And there you go.
Yeah.
If you have 4 sentences to repeat over for 90 minutes, I think you're going to be able to present like it gave off salesman vibes.
Yes.
But if they were both salesmen, I think I know who I'd be buying from, without any measure of quality. But
that's what presentation is. And Dr. Weil, you're talking about mock trial. I mean, I was on your mock trial team, and you won if you were the best in presentation. Because the more confidence you showed, the better you were able to articulate and enunciate, to explain. Your persuasiveness increased. We're trial attorneys, Chelsea. What's the best way to win a case is to be good at presentation. And presentation is how you look, how you sound. It's how people perceive you, not necessarily what's coming out of your mouth. It helps to have both. You win if you have both. But at this point, it's like, well, we're fighting for the biggest loser rather than who's winning. And Dr. Weil.
Go ahead. So sorry. I was also going to say, why do we have both of these people who it seemed to be like, well, I don't want to be president. I'm only running because you're running. I don't really want to be president. What is happening right now?
Well, that was a big fat lie from Trump. Like, he decided because Biden was going to continue running. No.
Be for real. Be so for real right now.
He didn't even think he lost the first time.
So let me tell you how Joe Biden could become one of the greatest presidents of the United States.
Thank you. And this is where we're headed. So everybody, I want you to really pay attention here, because this is where Dr. Weil's political science background and constitution background with elections is going to come into play, is what is a better option. Is there a better option?
So let me tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
So George III is sitting with Benjamin somebody.
Oh, goodness. Great start, Dad.
Let me see. Okay. You may need to cut this out, but let's try it. Benjamin West, who is a portraiture artist. And the king says, what do you think George Washington is going to do now that he's won the American Revolution? West says, the reports are that he's going to go back to his farm. And George III is utterly amazed. And he says, if he does that, he'll be the greatest person in the world. Because most people who lead revolutions end up as dictators. Right. They don't renounce power. Washington did this not once, but at least twice. Mm-hmm. He turned his sword over to Congress, went back to the farm. And after 2 terms of the president, although he clearly could have won re-election, he decided to go back home again. Now, electors have already been delegates to the convention have already been chosen for both parties. They both have more than the majority that they need. And under convention rules, they are obligated, at least on the first ballot and often beyond that, to vote for the candidate that they're pledged to. So right
Biden's
now,
already
we haven't
the
had the
candidate.
But Biden and Trump, they are the 2 people who are going to be the nominees. Unless, you could have a revolt. You could have people who say, well, I was elected, but that was before we saw what Biden was like, or that was before we realized, how anti-immigrant Trump is, or whatever. But I think the commentators are right that and they're mostly talking about Biden right now, that you're not going to oust Biden at this point. But what would happen if Biden stepped forward and said, I have noticed, particularly, and as you've noticed in the debate, that I've gotten older. I think I still have a lot to offer my country. I think I've done a lot for my country. but I want to leave on a high note. I want to leave like Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
I have Alzheimer's. I want everybody to know I'm walking off the public stage. Uh, I still love my country and whatever. I think if Biden did that, and particularly if he could meet with advisors and say, you know, we have concluded that the strongest Democratic candidate is, and I'm going to let Phil, is it the governor of California? Is it the governor of Michigan? Is it his vice president? I think not. But, you know, come to some kind of consensus among top Democrats. I'm releasing my delegates, but I would urge you to vote for so and so. And the party, realizing the situation that it's in, rallies behind them, have a whole new ball game.
That's
That could
what's
happen, but
behind
I
door
don't think
number
it would
3.
happen. I don't. And Trump, of course, could do something similar if he chose. He did say last night that he would rather be other places other than on the. He's, as you say.
Sorry.
Biden ran because he thought he could beat Trump, and now Trump's saying, "Well, I have to run because I don't want you." Maybe they should both step aside.
They should take a little bro vacation, both pull out of the race, and go on a little like vacation to an island somewhere and
Maybe
be
they
done.
can play golf.
There we go.
Here's the golf piece.
And by the way, and speaking of manhood, if this were early America, the way you would test your manhood would be to play Andrew Jackson. You go out or Aaron Burr and Alexander
Hamilton. Make America duel again.
You do 10 paces each, you turn around and shoot one another and see what happens. And I'm not advocating that, but I have rarely seen such a petty display of masculinity by any two men as arguing over what their handicap in golf is and whether they can carry their golf bags across the course. I found that a very cringe-worthy moment.
Yes, I think to the things you were saying before, Dr. Vile, I think that both of them not pulling out, especially Biden, who has served his country for so long, just is proof positive that it's not about service, right? Like, because if you really cared that much, you wouldn't be putting your desire to be in power over that. And then again, we have like the toddler thing of like, well, you're the creep and loser. Well, no, you're the creep and loser. Well, you're the felon. No, your son's the felon.
Yes.
But the golf thing is where I lost it. Why were we talking about golf?
And the reason I think that Biden could do this, and I think it actually would enhance his reputation. I mean, he is running on the platform, and I think there's something to it that, he got involved because he thought his country needed him. And he thinks Trump is involved just because Trump has too big an ego for letting anybody else be president. And I think this would be Biden's way of sort of saying, I said I cared about my country, and I do. Now, let me back up just a little bit. It's possible that the image we got of Biden last night is just not that accurate. But we've had a special prosecutor.
Yes.
Who concluded very much the same. We had a Wall Street Journal article within the last month or two, which basically said Biden is beginning to slip, and everybody's covering him for him. And if he is, I would like to see a woman president.
Yes.
Not anybody in
I'd love
particular.
that.
I'd just like to see a woman president. But I would prefer that a woman be elected on her own as president, rather than just slipping into the office because someone has finally passed away or is so infirm that they can't do it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not expecting
I think we need an upper
happen.
age limit. This is absurd. I said, I think we need an upper age limit. This is truly, I think about it, and obviously this is president, but I think about all of the Senate and congressional hearings when we had these specifically significantly older members of Congress who can't seem to wrap their head around how the internet works when they're, interrogating these CEOs of various
As the
companies.
oldest one among us, I need to make a little reservation.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, and let me tell you a story. So, private universities used to, some of them may still do it if they're private, but they had a rule that said you had to retire at 65.
Wow.
And probably
That's kind of young. That's kind of young.
Probably the best professor one of two best professors that I ever had was Alpheus Mason, who taught constitutional law at Princeton University. I had an NEH seminar under him. He, from 65 to 80, he went from one semester to 2-year appointments all over the country. I had him at the age of 79, and the next semester he went to Yale. Unfortunately, the semester after that, he got shingles and had a rather painful ending. But, you know, if we said it, I would hope we wouldn't set it too low. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there are people who at 70 are more like 50-year-olds, and I think I
Yeah.
can think of some 50-year-olds who are more like 80-year-olds.
Yeah.
Typically, you expect the public to be able to weed that out,
You would
but
think.
particularly the presidency is so insulated in so many ways from real life, and what we see is not always what we get. Woodrow Wilson had a major stroke, and one of the best lines in recorded history, I guess, is they finally propped him up in bed, and a key opposition leader came to check on him, and he said, "I'm praying for you every day." And Wilson said, "Well, what are you praying for?" And that was an indication, okay, he still had a sense of humor. But it was probably false, because most people believe that Wilson's wife largely ran the country for the last 6 months to a year.
And I think a lot of people are concerned with Biden on that is, well, he's a figurehead where advisors must be running the country. And honestly, for me personally, the question in my mind that keeps going, even with Trump's cases, especially this documents case, is, are either of these men sufficiently equipped to keep control, understand, and correctly utilize state secrets?
Yeah.
Are either of these men people that we want to entrust national security with, entrust foreign affairs with? Will Biden be able to even articulate anything? Will Trump be able not to prevent, will he not anger others?
So there was a great
bag.
article this last week about Benjamin Franklin. He was the oldest person at the Constitutional Convention. He was 81 years old. And he was actually fairly effective. Somebody had to, James Wilson often read his speeches for him, but particularly when it came to promoting social harmony and compromise, Franklin was very good. But what the article didn't say is that delegates followed him almost everywhere he went for fear that he would let the cat out of the bag, because it was supposed to be a secret proceeding. And so even they were concerned about, sort of a similar issue. Is he going to forget the rule here and say something that he's not supposed to?
And at one point, Trump said something where I gasped out loud, something to the effect of, in this year, there was a meeting, did he say 23? Maybe I'm 23.
Yeah, he said it was a top secret meeting, and guess what the secret was?
Yeah, super secret meeting. Nobody knew about it. And I was like, well, now we all do.
Yeah.
And that was very concerning, is where he's going to boast about something secret that really maybe should not have come out last night. Would you want to have been another world leader who was part of that meeting? You kept your end of the bargain, and now it's out that you were there. So all of this...
Also, on a less controversial note, I really have a hard time with someone being the commander-in-chief who's never served. I think, on a less controversial bit about the two of these candidates, like it seems pretty shocking, and I don't know the history, you probably do, Dr. Weil. I think it's probably rare. I think before this, probably most of the candidates had military service.
Well, of course, Biden gets something of a mulligan because he had a son who served and possibly died. I mean, at least it shows there a connection there. We have civilian control over the military. So, but I did think
McCain running, we've had Dole running, we've had President Grant, we've had President Eisenhower,
we've had
Washington was, the leader of the American Revolution.
But Woodrow Wilson, to my knowledge, never served in the military. Nixon did, Kennedy did. Okay, I probably better not shoot. I don't think Lyndon Johnson did.
I have no idea.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's concerning. I think that it's good to know that there is at least an option for door number 3. whatever that is. Dr. Weil, how soon is this convention, at least the Democrat convention?
I think the Republican is first, isn't it? And I think it's coming up in 2 or 3 weeks, and I believe the Democratic one is in August. Now,
but there's not much time to figure it out if they're going to
there's
use
not,
those
there's not.
delegates
If
for
you-
someone
and
else.
I think that's one reason most people are just saying it's ridiculous to think of switching now. There's actually, the Constitution actually specifies if the election is over, then the vice president automatically becomes president in the case of incapacity or death. But prior to that, I don't believe that this would all be extra constitutional. And most, the caucus method of selecting presidents, the presidential primary, the convention, all of this has grown up around the Constitution. Constitution doesn't mandate it.
And that's, I think, what's the most interesting piece to me is I think a lot of people assume, and I keep getting caught up in it, even though I know better, that this is in the Constitution, that these delegates are in the Constitution, but they're not.
Well, the Electoral College delegates are in. That's what's
Correct.
confusing about it. But the delegates to the convention, right? That's
party
basically
conventions.
a party decision. And each party has its own rules and its own way of allocating delegates and the like.
Get a big third party going. I'm really over this 2-party bit. I just
Well, if you look at the third party options this year,
not him, though.
you may realize that's not going to be that big a help. But anyway.
Yeah, I've never wanted to be in politics in my entire life, and I'm so frustrated. I'm like, if anybody will elect me, I'll get involved. I don't want to, but somebody's got to step up. And then, then I put my nice, good hat on going, Virginia, you're absolutely crazy. Of course, this is not what you need to be doing. I'm rightfully sitting in my legal career.
I would vote for you. You have my vote.
And you know that my childhood dream was to be president. And it wasn't until about 20 years ago that I realized the president I wanted to be was James Madison. So I went out and bought a wig and a costume, and that's the president that I am from time to time.
Well, I would absolutely vote for you.
Yes, I would.
Honestly, let's start a writing campaign for Dr. Weil here.
That's what I'm saying. We got some common sense injected back into the presidency.
Okay, so there's this. Now, those are the options. I think we have a better idea. I don't know that anybody can rally the troops, so to speak, to do this. First, even convince Biden that that's what should be done. Have him get on board that, yeah, this is a better thing. And then even if he does have within a month, rally the troops to around one other person, because as Chelsea's been pointing out, where is this one other person? Why haven't they stepped forward? Why is there no other option? Why are there no others? So it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. But certainly it has been eye-opening. Maybe that's the phrase I'm looking for, an eye-opening debate. I thought they would be just a little silly, but I don't think I was expecting the different levels of, as most commentators are saying, the disability effect of Biden, the incompetency effect of Biden, and the lying of Trump. So I heard there was some comment of it's the fact checker to end all fact checkers, or some kind of comment like that of, Chelsea, you were saying before, is why couldn't we have a little bell going off and a comment of this is not a fact. So I think there were downsides to both. I think that Trump did make a lot of falsehoods. Don't ask me to quote them all. There are other websites and sources you can use for that.
After-birth abortions, we can start there.
So there are a lot of problems. So I think that is problematic too. That's a content problem. And it is hard for me to trust a leader who is lying. But there's also been the comment made of, it's hard to know if he's lying, though, because he seems, and this has been a constant issue, he seems so confident in the way that he presents it. It feels like truth. And, Biden kept saying over and over, well, he's lying. But we go back to the presentation, the way that he presented it, that power of persuasion, there's that lingering doubt of, well, is it a falsehood? Are we
So
sure it's not true?
there's a fable from the Middle Ages where they're having a contest to imitate a pig, how a pig sounds, and they give it to the local, and then the guy reveals that he's actually has a pig, and the pig has been the one squealing, and they didn't recognize it because they're all city folk.
Oh, how interesting. Yeah, so we will see. I want to make sure to draw it back around. Do either of you have anything else that you feel is important to say or to discuss in concluding the debate topic?
Someone can explain
Don't
to
be
me what a golf
surprised if it's the
handicap
last
is.
one of the season.
Okay, so Chelsea's saying, what is a golf handicap? And Dr. Viles saying...
Let me know in the comments. I think we'll see what y'all have to say about it.
And Dr. Vile, you're suggesting that this is the first and the last debate that they will be having?
I would be very surprised. If I were Biden's folks, I would not. Well, either of them. Trump won. Take it.
Yeah.
You lost. Don't take another chance of losing again.
Yeah.
I think just this is my last thing, but on what Dr. Vile is saying, I think Biden, I think this was the worst choice he could have made, was showing up and presenting like that. Like, I think this did so much harm to his poll numbers. I think once we see the data, that it will show that.
Yeah. And I think he was gaining a little traction after Trump's conviction. That had given him a little bit of a nudge in the right direction for the Democratic camp. And for the Republican camp, I think this has now pushed in that mindset Trump beyond the conviction, where it's like, well, okay, he's convicted. It's maybe a financial crime, but at least he's competent. At least he's confident. And who do we want running our country? Do we want, no fool like an old fool, but they both are. So when faced with that kind of comparison, those are tough comparisons. And I'll say this also for the younger generation. I think especially teenagers, 20-year-olds, it's already hard to fathom older people and the age gap. But I think this really might be pushing 20-somethings, 30-somethings into the area of, well, I don't want someone who's completely incompetent, even if I don't agree with the other, where I think maybe middle, and this is more supposition than any, solid factual basis or statistical approach, but it feels like for me as a middle-aged person I'm trying to sort through the substance, not just the appearance. Dr. Vile, I'm with you, is I don't think age necessarily matters, but there's this perception of, well, if I had an ailing parent or grandparent who were showing these signs, I'd be more likely to put them into hospice. Well, not necessarily hospice, but, hospital care.
You're rushing things.
Nursing.
Boot him out of here.
Nursing care.
Okay, I'm out of here.
When Dr. Vile shows up in hospice next week, we'll all know why. But I think there's the elderly issue is there's a lot of distance between the younger and the old generation, and they're much closer to that oldest generation now. And I think that's a concern. So I think in viewing it, the question is, well, what is option 3? And if we don't have an option 3, how are we going to sort through the substance versus the performance versus the competence? And there's a risk for all of it, right?
I think people are going to opt out,
candidate.
to be honest. Like the apathy, I think people, if these are our choices at the end, I think I see this a lot in, my generation and younger, that if it's just apathetic, then I'm just not going to participate in this because this is silly and it's absurd either way. So I think if there isn't a third option, people are just not going to participate.
All that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men and women to
do nothing. I know.
And was that Bonhoeffer? Who was that statement by?
I'm not sure.
It was related to World War.
I almost think it might have been Edmund Burke, but I'm
Okay.
not positive about that.
Yeah, but for evil to prevail is for good men to stay silent.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, choose what form of speech you should use and how to exercise it. Your rights to vote, your rights to speech. Look into all of your options. Consider. Do look beyond presentation for both candidates. Look into the substance of what they're saying. Look into the platforms that they have. Consult your local politicians. Consult your groups. Make the effort to engage in democracy. We have so many rights. We have so many options that others don't have. Don't reject the process. My encouragement would be don't reject the process. Don't, forsake the process. Use it to make and be the change that we want to be for the positive. We are not a third world country. We are a first world country. We have options and opportunities that so many people, all these immigrants that are being mentioned, right? They come here for a reason. And it's not because we're the worst nation. I think we have an amazing nation, amazing democracy that always is seeking to be perfected, will always be changing. And the idea and the question that I pose to everyone is, what type of change do you want it to be? And what is your role going to be in making that change? So on that note, it is good to talk with you both. Thank you for a lively discussion on the debate. I think our discussion is more lively than last night's debate itself. But stay tuned with us. We'll end here today. Don't forget to check out thelawunscripted.com for our free resources of this podcast for the Legal Weekly Wine, as well as the podcast of The Law Unscripted, and the bar and law school course preparation materials that we have. We are in the middle of bar review season. The July bar examination is coming up. For those of you looking for some additional supplemental material, whether it's an outline, lectures, hypotheticals, we have it all on our website for the eight core subjects, including criminal law, constitutional law, contract, civil litigation, civil procedure, and more. So check that out. We also have an affiliate link for Quimby. So if you want a full bar review material program, that would be Quimby. We do have the affiliate link in the description section. And stay tuned with us. Make sure you check back into our program repeatedly this week. This is one of those rare exceptions where we will be posting multiple videos this week so that we can cover all of the hottest topics, because there are too many. Next up will be some of the Supreme Court decisions from this last week in June, including the emergency abortion case. I'll remind us of the homeless encampment case, the opioid decision regarding Purdue Pharma, federal agency issues, as well as the January 6th case with criminal law. So stay tuned with us for that. Drop a comment, drop a thought. Please try to be respectful, and we will catch you next time on the Legal Weekly Wine.